Hi, this is Esther Lynn, photographer for MMAfighting.com, and here's a recap of my week and photos from UFC 185. The week began for me on Thursday with Media Day because during the workouts, I was at a press conference in Los Angeles for a little boxing event coming up in May. I took a red eye into Dallas and was happily greeted at the American Airlines Center by a dog adoption fair. Many cornermen diverted from the press activities inside those doors to come visit the pups in need of homes. I came to say hello to this Airedale puppy before going inside to photograph the fighters. Inside, the fighters were in good spirits despite cutting weight. Cejudo laughed with reporters, and I wandered around the room, both asking for portraits and just observing, listening to interviews. I took a wide shot of the challenger, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, because I liked her shoes and I liked her overalls. Alistair Overeem added to the playful air of the day when I asked him for portraits, and he prepped a few model-like expressions. And after a few poses, he laughed and shared a joke with head of PR Dave Schwaller. At the face-offs, as predicted, the best face-off was between strawweights Carla Esparza and Jędrzejczyk, who told the champ she couldn't say she was number one and waved her off. Esparza smiled, but the tension continued even as they left the stage. The next day, Donald "Cowboy" Cerrone participated in the fan Q&A, getting the warmest of welcomes from Dallas as he downed many gifts of Budweisers from the fans. Then a fan asked to face off with him, and Cowboy obliged, and mid-stare, he gave her a scare, jolting her. But it was all in good fun. Then, at the weigh-ins, the challenger gifted the champ a cookie, which seemed to baffle Joe Rogan, so he interrupted their pose-off to ask the Polish striker, "Why did you give her a cookie?" And then he asked Carla, the cookie monster Esparza, if she'd ever been given a cookie. It was all very silly. That cheerful exchange led into the main event, where it was considerably more serious. Both men kept their hands low, but fists wound tight, jaws clenched, percolating under their skin. That night, CM Punk and Donald Cerrone were getting along famously. After CM Punk's media dinner, where apparently Cowboy had approached the table of writers and the new UFC signee to say he'd heard that Punk could make 170. By the time they returned to the hotel, the pair seemed a perfect cast for a buddy cop film as they posed for photos in the driveway. It's fight night, and I'm thwarted by the referee's movement from properly focusing on Germaine de Randamie's apparent arm-breaking kick against Larissa Pacheco. The Iron Lady returned to her kickboxing route to dominate the young Brazilian and finished her fight, emotions crashing over her as she recounted having lost her four-legged best friend that week. She was happy to win, but impatient to return home to lay her dear friend Aris to rest. Then Irish Joseph Duffy made an impressive UFC debut, decimating Jake Lindsay under 2 minutes. And apparently, as Errol Hawani pointed out to me, he is the last person to defeat featherweight challenger Conor McGregor. Interesting. In a bizarre end, underdog Ryan Benoit expresses his frustration with being underestimated on Sergio Pettis, whom he had just knocked out, by kicking him square in the butt. Duke Rivas points as he rushes up to enter the cage, and Benoit is chased away by the referee, who leaves Sergio to reprimand the Texan, leaving the younger Pettis to stumble unattended about the cage, concussed. Beneil Dariush triumphantly waves an Assyrian and American flag after his skillful, fantastic victory over Darren Cruikshank. Dariush was so filled with joy, he didn't notice his flag was inverted. I shouted through the cage at Coach Rafael Cordero that Dariush's flag was upside down, and he smiled and went to write the stars and stripes for his jubilant fighter. In this sequence between Ross Pearson and Sam Stout, we see the two fighters duck under each other's strikes and then wind up for the counter. Both wound up almost comically. And in the next instant, where Stout chose to go to the body, Pearson's return lands sooner and square on the Canadian's chin, earning him an extra $50,000. While I could add to the praise being heaped on Roy Nelson for being inhuman, I just wanted to take some time to showcase the varied strikes with which Overeem bruised Big Country. Overeem fought smart, landing viciously, and though oddly booed in the arena, there was plenty of violent action in this bout. Then, my most anticipated fight was on deck. I excitedly waited for the strawweight champ to emerge from the tunnel, and though I photographed her many times, this was the first time I saw Esparza as small. She walked toward the cage and was dwarfed in this huge arena. Once inside, across the cage, Joanna Jacek reminded us that she would be number one. She radiated confidence. Immediately, the challenger set the tone as Esparza dove for takedowns and was refused over and over again. And every failed takedown was met with a barrage of strikes. Esparza kept trying, but Jacek stayed firm, peppering the champ at every turn, and in that final, ferocious flurry, the referee stepped in just as Esparza's legs finally gave out, catching the worn wrestler before she fell. The Polish fighter was now the champion, as she'd been promising this entire time, and she cried, overwhelmed with happiness. I watched the quiet but crushing disappointment in Esparza's face as she watched the replay of her unravel on the big screens. Then, the usurper Dos Anjos walked out and waited in the darkened octagon for the champion. The two met in the center of the octagon, no glove touch. It didn't even seem that either were listening to the referee speak. They were only looking at and through each other. There would be no feeling out in this fight. Dos Anjos came straight at Pettis with hard, relentless strikes, and within the first minute, Pettis was rubbing his face to check for blood where there was only pain. In that telltale sign of a broken orbital, Dos Anjos never let up. The king was being overthrown in brutal fashion. Between rounds, I marveled at the blood streaming from the champion's brow. I had never seen Anthony Pettis battered in this way. In recent years, Showtime had looked so invincible. But here, he looked unable even to breathe enough air. Dos Anjos was unyielding. On the feet, on the ground, Dos Anjos continued to club at the champ. The rounds felt endless. Chrissy Blair then came around the octagon for the fifth and final round. Would Pettis pull off a spectacular comeback with something completely new and unseen? After a Hail Mary flying knee, the crowd perked, but not long after a last flurry, Pettis found himself once again on the ground, this time with his back taken. The sound was sucked out of the American Airlines Center. There was no booing, nor it was an odd quiet, about as silent of a main event as I've ever witnessed. In the end, Dos Anjos dethroned the champ over 5 rounds of unrelenting offense. The Brazilian had unseated Showtime. Dos Anjos clutched his hard-earned belt, while Pettis paced in the background. It's been years since two titles have changed hands in the same night, and both performances were so vicious in their domination. Despite losing her title in such a rough manner, Esparza was positive in the post-fight press conference. She even chimed in when asked to talk about her favorite things in Dallas. Without hesitation, Esparza picked up the mic and said, "Pecan Lodge barbecue, the ribs." I did actually go to Pecan Lodge as well, and can confirm it is quite delicious. As the press conference ended and everyone left the dais, Joanna and Jacek sat there with her belt, and we politely asked her to pose. She was right a month ago when she said it wouldn't matter if we didn't know how to pronounce her name, because come March 14th, we would all be calling her Joanna Champion. So, congratulations, number 1, UFC strawweight, Joanna Champion. This is Esther Lynn from MMAfighting.com, and thank you for watching.